Let's move on to a different story now. We've been dealing with the tunnels and video compositing for quite a number of tutorials, and there is a lot of other things to explore. This one here is painting with particle brushes, but particularly one thing I want to do is experiment with the settings for particle brushes, so that we can see if there's a way to make it look like smoke trails, and then perhaps smoke trails that we can put on top of an image with a rocket engine, and then perhaps smoke trails that animate too. So let's see what we can do. First of all, we open the particle brush settings. Make sure you pin it down so it stays in place, and the default brushes will look something like this. The default particle brush, that is, will look something like this, and the first thing we'll probably want to do is stop the gravity from taking it down. See, you see how it's falling down because we have the gravity setting pulling it down here. If you gave it negative gravity, like negative 0.3, it would push it up, and that's great for grass. If you change the gradient to something greenish or dry brush or something like that, you can use that to quickly create a nice looking set of grass, maybe more velocity, something like 2 or 3 on the initial velocity. And so it also has some of the tufts, some of the grass helms growing downwards. Then you could add some shading to that, so they look shaded on the bottom side. And perhaps also fine line rather than regular lines, make it shrinking lines so they get finer. And you see how you can very quickly create some really awesome and very unique type of grass, tufts of grass and patches of baddie grass. We have actually some presets here. If you click on load, aloe, let's have a look at 1 or 2 of those. Let's see, the baddie grass, one of my favorites, and it's a really great way to get quickly some fascinating landscapes, some close-ups of very different types of graphics. Now I'm going to explore a little bit smoke trails. So the thing we'll do is we'll say, okay, gravity not so much initially, initial velocity, yes, we need some particles to shoot out. We don't need it to go ahead of us though. Right now you see as I'm moving to the right, the particles kind of shoot in that direction too, and there's a couple of ways to make that happen. The drag, if you have it at 1, it kind of doesn't go anywhere. If you set the drag to 2 or 3, it trails behind us. So anything bigger than 1, you could make it at 1.1 or something like that. It will gradually kind of move in the other direction. And so if you want to have it shoot really quickly, you set the drag to maybe a 7, and it shoots out really fast. But you see, it's also, let's see what else we have. It's splitting. Maybe we don't need that quite yet. So let's split 0 times, and that makes it a very short-lived set of particles. Maybe we need to give the particle lifespan a little bit a longer longevity here. Maybe let's make it 44, and so now we have particles. Let me zoom out a little bit. Now we have particles that shoot for a little bit longer. Now I'm still drawing those shrinking lines, and what I'd like to do really, instead of go to a brush, so I can control what those the brush metrics looks like along that. So I'm going to switch over to brush, in which case it's using whatever my current brush is, probably the default brush, and that's already starting to look pretty nice, like a bit of a smoke trail. Now what I did for the brush, if you click on the settings here for regular brushes, make sure that one is pinned down too. You notice I have some random position. You might not have that initially, so it would be going along the particle paths, right? So instead of that, if you give it a little bit of randomness, let's see, random position 55, it's going to look a little bit more smeary or blurry, because it's actually every dab is got a slightly different position, right? So it's kind of randomized at that level. Now you have other places where you can randomize it as well. And that's right in the particle system itself, randomized by value. Let's say if you give it 4, then those particles are just going everywhere because their paths are randomized, and some of the parameters, like some of these values you have here, are given a little bit of a boost in one way or another. And so you can play with that a little bit too to make it look a bit more turbulent. And then of course the color. Let's give it different sort of gradient colors. Maybe that's where you need to actually have a bit of a gradient. Let's go click on that. So let's experiment with the gradient colors. For one, it starts dark and goes to red and then eventually to white, and that's kind of counterintuitive. We really should have a very bright outburst initially when we're close to the engine where the smoke comes from, and then it eventually gets darker and darker as it's losing its brightness to the fire. So we need to switch this around, flip it to a bright one, and maybe not white. I mean, that's certainly going to look great. We can certainly use that. But we could also do something that's a bit more bluish. So what we do is we go to the red channel and reduce it so that we have more of the blue dominating here. That will make it a bit more like really hot fire. Don't give it too much though. Something like so. And then of course if we want to make it look like dirty smoke, less saturation is always better. Kind of a grayish tint there to that. Alright, so we have a little bit of a smoke trail here. Now the particles are still kind of spreading too far, so maybe that velocity, the terminal velocity, needs to be contained a little bit. Maybe, let's see, what else do we have that we might use to affect that? Initial velocity 1, so it doesn't actually have too much of that. Spreading sideways. In fact, if we give it 0, let's see what happens there. Yeah, that's good enough too. It still goes out though. Split angle. Do we have splits? No. We don't actually split, so the angle doesn't have any effect there. Let's see if we have a shorter lifespan. Maybe we can have more particles per initial emission. Let's give it 5. That will start making it a bit slow though. So what we want to do is reduce the number of particles, but then it comes out in bursts. So it's good to have still quite a high number of maximum particles. There you go. Let's see what else. We have the lifespan. Let's bring that down a little bit more. There you go. Now, one thing I'm going to do is switch to black for the background color and erase it to that, and just draw my smoke like this. Okay, that's a little bit better. So it's heading in the right direction. There's probably a few more things we might want to do. Maybe the mode. Instead of the mode being replaced, I wonder if we can add some smearing. And there is actually a mode kind of built into it here, the Nova, which can also be interesting. It's more of a fire though, not so much of a smoke trail. So let's stay with the brush and see what else we can do to that. Probably the drag is a little bit too high here. Let's give it just about 3. And and then we have also to use the mouse velocity, and particles follow the mouse. So if we don't do that at all, it kind of stays in place. And sometimes that's what you want, because you have the rocket fly into the sky and then it leaves a trail there, right? So you want to have just maybe a little bit of movement, and in which direction that movement is really what the drag is controlling. Now if you were to give it something like -5 or 4, it would shoot ahead of us, and that can actually look really nice for certain types of fireworks where it goes in all directions. But again, what we need to do with the drag is perhaps something like 3 or 4. And so it stays behind, but still moves a little bit if we give it some particles follow mouse. See how it, and then eventually it kind of stays there. Alright, so that's probably going to look really interesting when we turn this into an animation. The other thing we might want to do also is a little bit more smearing. Let's see if we set the mode on the brush themselves, right? Because we use the brush style here on the particles, so the brush, whatever mode we have, like rub through or gray, paint smear, that might also be interesting. Whoa, no, that's actually not so interesting. It drags the existing image. Look at that. It's like, well, yeah, it's surrealistic. I mean, look at that. All right, so we have a paint smear effect we can explore there. Let's do a smear, regular smear. Not much better either. Okay, so that's not it. Maybe the opacity. How about if we go back to default, or maybe multiply? That, you know, that will make it more like, well, it's dark already. It's going to stay dark unless if we start with a bright, yeah, then that's going to do a bit of a damaging darkness added to the smoke there too. Let's see what else. We could do an additive. That, of course, will make it brighter and brighter. Not so much what we want, but, you know, sometimes on a night sky you want a bright smoke trail. Let's see what other modes. Subtractive. Let's just use the default, and that seems to be a little bit faster. And then we can also perhaps work with the opacity, because right now each of these dabs are a full opacity. What if I make them a little bit less? Actually, they're not at full opacity. Look at that. That's full opacity. Okay, so now that's very, you see the turbulence there, but how about if we reduce the opacity even more? There you go. That's a bit more of a semi-transparent smoke trails. And so now, imagine you have an animation where you have a rocket going from left to right, and you want to actually animate it. So now what we'll do, first of all, we'll save these settings, right? This is good. It's not perfect yet. We might do more. We might get better with that. Maybe add a little bit of shading. So if this is in the night sky, we actually have a little bit of shading appearing for the darker side, the bottom side of the cloud trail is going to be shaded. Maybe we want to tint it with a bit of a bluish tint. And so you can... or yellow or greenish tint, so you can easily work with that. But this is a preset you want to use. So oh, let's see the age decrement. That one might also do a little bit of extra magic. Yeah, we're not actually branching, so we're not splitting, so it's not going to have any impact on that. All right, so we need to save these settings. Let's go and save. And we get the whole list of existing OPT, optipostic particle brush settings here. And so that's under Howler particles. That's in this folder. And I'm just going to go call that my smoke trail. My smoke trail 001. And it will go through probably several iterations. And it will add the .opt enregistré to save that. And so now I should have, if we go to load, it should be somewhere in alphabetic order, I would think. There it is, my smoke trail. So if I switch to some other, like KB, what's that one? Some palm trees, and I want to go back to my smoke trail, there they are. All right, so that's great. We can save those settings and get back to it when we feel adventurous and want to improve it even more. But now let's actually use that in an animation. So in an animation, what you might want to do is have, let's say you have a rocket that goes from left to right. In fact, you know what? I wonder if I have a rocket in my media from the stickers, the 3D stickers brushes. Yeah, let's see the stickers. Do we have, let's go pin this down. Do we have a rocket here somewhere? I just don't remember. Knights and dragons, fairies, dinos, food, art, fun, barnyard, animals, cars. Cars are not rockets, but maybe they will just do as a backup. Pirates, fruit. Yeah, okay, you know what? Oh, circus. Maybe we have some... What else do we have? No rockets here. No. Alright, let's go. Let's try the cars. Let's see if we have... Yeah. It's not much. Okay, this car might look a bit like a rocket. So what I'm going to do is take this and pick it up. Okay, there, this one. One of those is going to be just fine. I'm going to go until I find the rocket rocket car. There, one more. This one. Okay, I'm going to pick this up. Let's go use the magic wand to make it. There it is, magic wand, to select all around it, and then pick just that one up. Okay, I don't care about this here. Let's ignore it. Let's just go with the custom brush pickup tool. And oh, we need to invert the selection. So selection invert. Where is it? There. And now we can go and pick up this much here as our new custom brush. We can clear the selection. We can store that selected brush we just picked up. There it is. Here's our brush, and we can rotate it a little bit so it looks like it's flying up into the sky. All right, something like this. And what we'll need to do is simply have it go along a path of some sort. So let's first create an animation and say we want 123 frames. It's going to play at 30 frames per second. There you go. And we want the rocket to go up that way. Now we can do that in a couple of ways. Since it's in the brush, what we could do is use the custom or the brush keyframer and simply say let's move it from here, perhaps even have it go smaller as it goes away into the sky. So initially it might even rotate a little bit. It might be like this. It might be pretty close. Something like this, and keyframe that, and then we'll have it go up about here, and it's going to go smaller as it goes up into the sky, and it's going to rotate about this way. All right, there you go. Keyframe that, and then we have somewhere around here it goes turns a little bit more, and keyframe that also smaller. Whoa, it's barely going to be visible in the end. And then we have it all the way here, gone all the way here, small, 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 and angle some more. Okay, let's see. That's a little bit too much horizontal. Something like that. Okay, so let's keyframe that. So we now have, and actually this very first keyframe, we might want to have it even a little bit smaller. All right. Keyframe that. So we now have a path that goes like this. Okay, let's render that. That's going to be our initial animation. The very last frame might be a little bit jumpy. There's a little cumulative error on that spline interpolation. You can see that if I play it, boom. Well, it's difficult to see, but if you go from one keyframe to the next, there it's very small steps, except for the very last one. It seems like boom, it jumps. So I mean, we could delete that last one, or we might not notice. It depends. What I'll do is first of all store this. I've been doing that lately. We can store this image to disk, so we don't waste too much RAM or memory. And at that point, we have an animation we can go back to as we experiment, right? So now let's go and experiment with those particle brushes. Enable them. Make sure you enable the particle brushes. Oh wait, now it's drawing our rocket along the particle paths. That's not what we need. So let's go undo that. We need to make sure we load our regular brush. What did we have? Probably, you know what? Probably we had the brush that's the simple airbrush, or like the large or medium airbrush. And then when we enable the particles, we have it go along that. There you go. That's probably it. Or we go load the one we saved, my smoke trail, right there. Okay. So now the particle brush, this path needs to follow the this smoke trail needs to follow the rocket. All right. So the trick now is to find it kind of going along that path, and that's not going to be a very easy thing to do because you know, if you have a good hand, or if you have a tablet or a pen, you might be able to draw that brush stroke kind of like that. That's going to be then something you can replay along the entire sequence, right? So for instance, if we see this here, where this is in one frame, let's go and undo that. Let's go and try to render this path along this, right? So how do we do that? How do we get this entire sequence kind of to receive a part of that brush stroke? Well, there's a stroke player, and I'm not going to pretend that I can really track it there, but let's pretend I did. Well, okay, I just did, I guess. Let's go and replay this brush stroke, undo this first, undo it, and then say under the animation you got a stroke player, and you can go and replay into all frames. Alright, so this brush stroke, instead of replaying it on the current frame, this is what it would do. On the current frame, it just replays it like that. If you change any parameters of your smoke trail, like the colors of the smoke, for instance, it will take that and replay that. Right? So that's the idea with this, is that you can practice and fine-tune it, and now you'd like to actually have that sort of spread into the entire animation. And so this is how you do that. Let's go and undo this, and then say, okay, make it go across all frames. Now, when you do that across all frames, it's going to be this little animated sequence like that. Okay, so sorry, I missed the trail. Maybe we need to do the rocket afterwards. Maybe we do the smoke first and then we put the rocket there. Now, there's other ways to get this right, but you can do a couple of things here. You can change the opacity, perhaps. Change the size to make them a little bit bigger, but opacity being very low, it's not going to be so destructive or impactful. Replay that, and let's see, what else do we have? We have perhaps a different level of opacity or a different gradient. Let's see if we have some other interesting gradients here, like this one. That one's a little bit fiery. We probably need more of that transparency added here. I mean, less opaque. So very, very subtle. Let's go set the size even bigger, so it's really kind of blending across what's already there. And that's the thing also, is sometimes you just need to make it go a few times, right? And then so gradually you get this effect that you're seeking here. It's not a single render necessarily. And so that could be a way to do that. You know, and so perhaps we'll say, okay, we need the whole thing restart from scratch, so let's erase. Make sure you don't paint anything in here anymore, because that brush stroke we just did is a good one. You want to keep that, right? So what you can do, you can save the brush stroke, by the way. The stroke replay here lets you save it and then load it again. And what I'll do is simply create a new one from this blank image, again, so 123 frames. And what I'll do is replay it. So here's the first replay, and then so we'll do that a few times, and then once we have that, then we can perhaps add some other types of content, like we might place the rocket in front of it. Right? Sometimes that's think outside the box, or think behind the rocket engine. You don't necessarily have to have the rocket first. Now, sometimes you have that, and you need to find another way. We'll do that in the next tutorial. There's a couple of other ways to get this smoke trail to look the way you want it. But here is one that I certainly think is really interesting. I'm going to reduce this a little bit and also switch to the Nova mode and see what that does. It's probably totally going to kill it. So let's first do an animation save, just in case this is as good as it will be. And where is it? There we go. We have this stored. And so now we have one more here. We'll go and replay with the smoke trail. So that's going to add a bit of fiery to it, right? Some bursts and blurbs of fiery glow. If we increase the quantity here, perhaps let's make it 22, and then perhaps also make the size a little bit smaller so we don't get to render that for too long. We'll have some extra content there. It looks like some spikes and sparks and additional stuff happening, like we have a sputtering engine. That's maybe one of those old VW bugs, Volkswagen sputtering engines. When you downgrade on your when you go downhill and you downgrade on your gears, so you have a little bit of explosive exhaust coming out here. Alright, so every time I do that, it renders an additional pass. Now I might want to go back to the brush and do some more at yet another color, right? You can certainly try this one here. Let's see what that one does. There's a little bit of blue magic happening there too. Alright, so we have this animation. Now let's go back to our rocket, and of course I wish I had kept the rocket, so I'm going to have to pick it up again here. It was under the cars, and with the cars I'm going to have to see if I can get to one of those. I think the next one is usable, so undo, 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 and of course I now no longer have my brush stroke. See, I should have saved it, but no, actually I don't need to paint it with the same brush stroke path. I can actually go and mimic the position on that, so I'll be fine. So I think I'm going to use this. I'm going to pick up the custom brush. This time I'll just use, no, let's still use the magic wand here. Let's still invert it. That's a shortcut vertical bar if you want to use that. And then you can use the custom brush right here. And right, that will pick it up as a custom brush. Let's store it. Should have done that earlier, so now we have it. Oh, you know what? I did do that. This looks very familiar. There it is. All right, silly me. Well, the blue one is pretty nice too. Let's use that. All right, so we have, let's clear the alpha. Let's clear this part. We can just paint black on it since there's nothing else around it. I'm painting black with the right button. I don't know what that is. There's something else down here in the bottom. So now we have a nice trail like this, and we need to have our rocket go in front of it, right? So let's go and place it right in front of that. Let's go to animation brush keyframer. And here it is. It shows the path that we had last time, but we're not going to use that anymore. So let's clear the path, and we see that we have the animation of the smoke trail. And we'll just put the brush right here in front. Let's turn it a little bit. Where's my angle? There it is. Something like that. Okay. And one thing we'll do, we'll actually give it a little bit of gap here in the left so that we can later also add a nice flare. We'll do some more post work on that. So maybe a little bit more rotation. There you go. Make sure it lines up kind of. There's actually an automatic line up tool too. There's an option here, a line path, but who knows? It's not going to be lining up the way we want it usually. So it's changing the angle based on the path, but it's not guaranteed to look exactly the way we want it. So what I'll do is I'll place it around here. I'll rotate it so that it kind of lines up like that, and I will keyframe that, and then I'm going to go and say by now we should have moved to about this place, and then also make it a little bit smaller, not too much, keyframe that, and then here we should have reached this place and make it smaller, and make it also turn a little bit now, right? There you go. And keyframe that a few times. You know, this is not rocket science, pun intended. We want to have this kind of look nice and still realize that there was an artist involved, right? So we have this, and perhaps we have him now around here, and it gets smaller and smaller, and a little bit more rotation is good, something like so. There you go. And then at the very end we'll just get him out of the picture. I mean, it's like around here, right? And keyframe that. All right, so we have a couple of paths for the rocket, for the spaceship, so to speak, to go along here. And let's go render that. And then once we have that, we need to add a little bit of something between on that gap, right? So let's get rid of this preview on the brush. Don't need that anymore. Don't need the brush stroke player anymore. Let's go and see what we have so far. There you go. So now we need to add a little bit of glare or something to, you know, close the gap here, so we don't really see that something's not quite. See, because there's a gap here, so we don't want to see that. So what I'll do is I'll use our beautiful Nova with the Nova options, or the lens flares, even better. So I'll go to the timeline actually, so I can keyframe the position of it. Right, so that's really the magic here, is that we don't want to just render it on a single frame. We want to render it on the entire image sequence. So there it is, lens flares. Sorry, I have my microphone misplaced. So here's the lens flare. What I'll do is I'll place it right there by the engine and by the exhaust, and give it a little bit of, you can change the flare settings if you'd rather have something that looks like this. That's a bit too much on the reflection, so you're gonna want to change it so it doesn't show too much of the lens reflections. I mean, this one's nice, but it might be a bit of an overkill. You know what I'm saying? Some of these here are good. Yeah, that's kind of interesting and mysterious looking. So let's go and do our best we can to keyframe that. Let's place it around here. And you know, if you can't see it, and I know it's a small picture, move it to the side, and then you can see where it is, and then just place your cursor there and single click, and it goes and jumps right to that position. All right, so that's one place. Keyframe that. Then we go about here, place it right there, click there, right, or maybe a little bit next to that. There you go. And you might even want to change the intensity a little bit. Maybe at first we boost a lot, so we throttle up and get this going. Then we keep going, and now we are starting to reach orbit, so we don't need to really throttle that much, so we can reduce the brightness a little bit. Plus it's farther away, so you want to add a little bit of keying to the distance, right? You want to make it look like it's way up in the sky. Up in the sky. What is it? Is it a horse, a dog, a sky, airplane? No, it's a waffle machine. And let's see, one more over here. And then the final one kind of out of the picture. And also a little bit smaller. There you go. Alright, so now we have this thing going along our path there. Alright? And apply that. Make sure it's save undo is enabled, so we can actually undo that. And so this is one level of animation that might be really good to use. Let's see it. There you go. Now maybe you'd like to add to that, or maybe that was too much, too strong. Maybe you'd like to reduce the intensity, do an undo, and change some things. But you could certainly also add to it with another level of spikes, like this one here. And so you see some extra lens flares being added to that, and that's where you just give it your personal touch. Look at that. Very, very different appearance every time you add something to it. I think one of those here might be really good. There, this one. That one will have kind of spikes that, see how it's changing every second, every frame is a little bit different, so it looks very noisy. I mean, very hot and fiery, very glary. Right, I like that. I mean, this is, oh wow. I'm glad this thing is flying away from me now, not in my direction. So let's go and apply that one.